As you may have noticed, I've made quite a big deal of talking about stuff that might get replaced soon at Universal. However, there is one major topic that I've continued to dodge up until today, and that is The Simpsons. With the ride itself only being 13 years old and much of the land being much younger, there's still talk about this land going away. Why? Well, in case you didn't know, Disney went ahead and bought 20th Century Fox, the previous owners of The Simpsons, for roughly around $70 billion. I don't know the exact amount, but it was something crazy like that. And now, of course, Universal's biggest competitor now owns The Simpsons. Unlike the other Disney property that appears in Universal, that being Marvel, this deal actually does have an expiration date. The contract is not available online, at least from what I can tell. However, the rumor has been that the deal will end in 2028, 20 years after Simpsons opened up at Universal Studios Florida. So given these current circumstances, that leaves us with three major questions. One, does Universal even want to keep Simpsons after that 20-year timeline is up? Two, can Universal and Disney actually make a deal? And three, what happens if a deal cannot be reached? Today, I will attempt to answer those questions for you folks, so let's get right into it. With first of all, would Universal want to even keep The Simpsons? A lot of people speculate that they don't. I mean, The Simpsons is extremely old at this point. A lot of people believe that it's not super popular anymore. It's lost a lot of its luster. Of course, you hear about diehard fans always talking about how this show was dead by season 6? So, it's obviously overstayed its welcome for many people. But, if I'm being honest with you, all that doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter at all. Because you gotta remember, The Simpsons, for a long time, has been an iconic landmark as a part of American culture. Even today, every other day, you'll see a new Simpsons meme pop up in your page. Like, seriously. But what if I were to take Back to the Future and disguise it as a new ride? Delightfully devilish, Universal. The Simpsons are still as relevant and as popular as they've ever been. Yeah, people aren't really watching the show as much as they were in the past. In fact, nowhere near as much as they were watching it in the past. But the characters are still so well known and so well beloved that it almost doesn't matter if nobody's watching the show. People have theorized that Disney will cancel the show in the next couple of years. Who cares? Right? Obviously, it's going to lower its popularity somewhat. But let's be honest, everyone already knows these characters. They're already so well known, so popular, that at this point, at least for the next 20 years, I don't see anybody forgetting about The Simpsons or caring less about them. And hey, if you're not a firm believer in Simpsons popularity, just look at the parks. Look at the main Universal Studios stores. The one in City Walk, the ones in front of Universal Studios Florida, and the one in front of Islands of Adventure. Look inside those. Notice what IP has a huge presence in all of those? It's The Simpsons. The Simpsons shows up big in every single one of those with the merchandise aisles for it specifically throughout each of them, where not every IP has as much retail space as they do. Clearly they give it that much because people are buying it. And let's not forget too, that 5 years after the ride opened, Universal expanded The Simpsons presence in the parks. It was basically just the ride when it first opened in 2008, but by 2013, they have a whole land themed around them, with a bunch of restaurants all themed around iconic food from the show. On top of this, they also added a new ride to the land with Kangaroos Twirl and Hurl. Yeah, it's just a flat ride, but it's still heavily themed to The Simpsons, and you couldn't just easily retheme the land around it and leave the ride the same. You would have to retheme the ride. That's how much of a commitment they've made to The Simpsons over the years. Though The Simpsons are far from the most popular characters at the park, they're probably one of the most well-known, and that's a big reason why I think Universal has found so much success with them. Speaking of them being well-known, let's go back and talk about these restaurants. There are so many iconic signature food and drinks that are available throughout this land. I mean, we talk about how successful butterbeer has been for Universal, but there are a lot of other signature iconic food and drink items that have also made them successful in other areas of the park, and one of them is here in the Simpsons land. Of course, you have the Krusty Burger, which although not being super special in and of itself, it does have the name attached to it that you see all the time in Simpsons episodes, so that's a big deal. Then, of course, you have Duff Beer. Duff Beer, are you kidding? That's something that people will pay premium prices for. On top of this, they're getting it from a local IPA place So their profit margins on those sales are going to be significantly higher than they would if they're selling regular beer. On top of that, I think a lot of people who would typically come to the parks to have beer are going to be more interested in having Duff beer than regular beer, since they can have regular beer outside the park, but they can't have Duff beer. Whew, that was a whirlwind of a statement there for Duff beer. But anyways, on top of this, they also have, of course, the big pink frosted sprinkled donut, another iconic piece of food and drink that's available in the land. And then, of course, you have a drink item that has its own episode in The Simpsons dedicated to it, the Flaming Moe. The Flaming Moe, absolutely iconic. It's something that people will take pictures of and do all the time. It's such a great signature drink item to have, and it's something that people will pay a premium price for. Universal has clearly shown immense dedication and love for this property, and it's brought back tremendous revenue for Universal as a result. So the bottom line is that The Simpsons has been a very popular and successful property at the Universal parks, and there's no doubt about it, they're going to want to keep it. It's been too successful and they've dedicated too much towards it for them to just give it all up now. But then, of course, that brings us to The Simpsons' new owners, Disney. Before we start talking about negotiations, can I just make a real quick point about Disney? Isn't it funny how at the end of the Simpsons ride, you know how Krusty the Clown pulls this joke?
Hey, what does this do?
Yeah, and your seat vibrates? Well, the interesting about it is that the exact same joke happens on Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, which just opened at Hollywood Studios in 2020. Take a look.
What's this lever do?
What? Disney, listen, dude, we know you don't come up with original ride ideas anymore, but like, can you please just come up with your own jokes? Like, it's not that hard. Come on now. Anyways, let's get back to talking about the deal. Now, of course, Disney is bringing in licensing fees and royalty fees from the two Simpsons lands across the nation. However, this company just dropped $70 billion to acquire another company, okay? The money they're bringing in from this is a drop in the bucket. They could care less. The big thing for Disney is the fact that Universal has one of their properties in the park. And of course, that's great for promotion reasons. I mean, I know this was a big point of contention when talking about Marvel, that, you know, Universal having it in their parks helps promote Marvel's brand, just as it does here for The Simpsons. However, there are rumors speculating that Disney doesn't really care about the Simpsons property and that they're going to slowly but surely phase it out and may even one day cancel the show. If this ends up being true, then of course it proves that Disney does not really care about the property. They do not care to incorporate it in their own parks. On top of this, it doesn't really fit the whole theme or aesthetic of Disney. Disney is of course much more family oriented, much more children oriented, and the Simpsons are very much so not that. So I think it's safe to say that we won't ever see the Simpsons in Disney parks, so Disney has no use for it whatsoever. Really, the main objective here for Disney, as far as why they wouldn't re-sign with Universal, is because they don't want Universal to have it, and it'd be much more impactful for Universal to have to tear down and replace that land than it would be for Universal to continue paying a licensing fee or a royalty fee, even if it was at a higher price. Even with this being the case, however, there is still room for a deal. As I mentioned earlier, there's another Disney property that's at Universal, and that is Marvel. Of course, that Marvel deal never has an end date and makes it exclusive to Universal in Orlando. So there is speculation that when these contract negotiations happen for The Simpsons, that it's possible Disney could call in the ultimatum and be like, hey, you give us Marvel, we'll give you Simpsons, and we'll throw in a couple other sweet treats. And boom, you have a deal. That's what the speculation is. However, of course, there's no doubt about it, Marvel is a much more popular, a much more valuable property right now than The Simpsons are, though of course Universal, as I mentioned earlier, has a whole lot of value in The Simpsons as well. Though, as many people wisely pointed out in my last video, of course Universal would never take a one-for-one swap Marvel for Simpsons, so there would have to be some other significant chips thrown in by Disney to sweeten the pot. Possibly a new IP that Universal could use to replace their Marvel land. So really, the way I see it, I think that Disney shows up to the table in one of three ways. One, they show up and they drastically increase the licensing and royalty fees and pretty much bring it to an almost astronomical level where either one, Universal would really have to really want to keep Simpsons to take it, or they'd be stupid to take it and they would have to just decline it. It would just be basically a faux offer. 2, they show up, they lay out the ultimatum, they say, hey, you either give us Marvel or you're not getting Simpsons back, all right? You're gonna have to replace it. And 3, they could just not show up. They might be like, you know what, we don't even want you to have Simpsons. We know you're not gonna give us Marvel, at least not unless we give you a ton of other stuff. So let's just not even bother talking about this, not waste any time. It's a no deal. You're gonna have to get rid of it. So now that brings us to our final question. What happens if Universal has to get rid of The Simpsons? I'm running out of time. I'm running. My time's up. Wise up, eyes up. I catch a glimpse of the other side. Lawrence leads the soldiers' chorus on the other side. My son is on the other side. He's with my mother on the other side. Washington is watching from the other side. Teach me how to say goodbye. Rise up, rise up, rise up, Eliza. My love, take your time. I'll see you on the other side. Raise a glass to freedom.
He aims his pistol at the sky. Wait!
Well, of course, they would need to find a replacement, and this would come at most 3 years after Epic Universe. I mean, it's very possible that Universal would know the result of the Disney negotiations before 2028 when the deal expires, so they may even look to replace the land sooner. But obviously, with this coming at that time, it's going to certainly push back many other projects. It could mean that Kid Zone could be around for much longer than we thought. Lost Content could stick around. Places that we thought were top of the tier list for getting out and getting replaced could suddenly be living much longer because The Simpsons couldn't get extended. Though I would find it somewhat surprising, I suppose it is possible that maybe Pokemon Land or Legend of Zelda could move here if that were to happen and Simpsons had to get fast-tracked as far as getting replaced. Because both of those lands are right now currently rumored to replacing Lost Content and Kid Zone, and if those lands stick around for much longer as a result of this, it's possible they could move and retrofit those lands to go in this plot. But of course, at the same time, 2028 is a ways away. 7 years, in fact. I mean, geez. That is quite a lot of time for Universal to be thinking about this, and there's plenty of new properties that could spring up over the years that could find their way into this land. So there are many options for Universal to go with. Of course, they ideally do not want to get rid of the land, but that's just the way it's going to most likely end up playing out. So to concisely and clearly answer the question of this video, will Universal Studios Orlando Simpsons Land be replaced? The verdict? Most likely. It will be replaced, as I don't think a deal with Disney is going to happen, and I think that it's going to have to leave, unfortunately. So let me know your opinions about whether or not you think The Simpsons are still actually a viable, popular property, whether or not you think that Disney and Universal can actually come to an agreement, whether it involves Marvel or not, and let me know what you think could potentially replace The Simpsons if and when they do go. Anyways, I'll see y'all next time. Peace.